Welcome, Ed, to Unusual Attitudes.
Thank you, Cliff.
So my first question always is, who is Ed LaPerche?
First, thanks for having me today. Sure. It's a great honor to be here. Ed LaPerche, from a professional experience perspective, I've done 35 years plus in the technology space, all in the business application space. And in that, I've lived through many transformations of technology over that time, which has been really rewarding to see how the industry has evolved and changed and how it's impacted everyday lives of people around the world. In the course of which I worked for large companies like Oracle and SAP, which has been a lot of fun and a lot of great opportunity to learn from some of the biggest providers in the world. And at the same time, I was with a lot of startup companies. I had the privilege of going through 3 IPOs that were all successful. One at Ariba in the .com era, then Salesforce.com, where we really took things to a next level. And then finally, I spent 11 years at Workday helping them grow from a company that was about 60 million when I got there. When I left, it was about 4 billion. So it was really very rewarding to be a part of those organizations, to see the kind of transformation that they, as a company, went through and how they really up into the industry as well.
So it's, no secret to call you a professional salesperson and a professional sales coach.
Correct.
Let's talk a little bit about that journey. You worked at SAP, at Oracle, at Salesforce, Workday. You're some major companies as they went through hyper growth periods. But as a sales professional, what was that transformation like for you? How do you go from a $60 million company to a $4 billion company as a sales professional? And you ran a large part of the organization at Workday in particular.
Yes.
What was that like for you?
You really have to keep a focus on learning, continuous learning at all times. You really can't be satisfied with the status quo. You've got to be willing, interested, and really seek out the opportunity to grow professionally and learn about what's coming, what's changing. Because one of the things about the technology industry compared to all other traditional industries in the world is that its pace of change is much more rapid than anything else out there in the world. When I first came into the industry back in the 90s, we were just kind of coming out of the mainframe era going to client server, and client server was all the rage. The word graphical user interface was in vogue, and the GUI, if you had a GUI interface, you were something really special and unique. And then that came of age, and client server became very costly, and we had to look for new ways to kind of deliver computing in a more cost-effective manner. And along came ASPs first, and then eventually multi-tenancy, which led to the cloud. So in the course of kind of, being in a selling mode and kind of learning your product and understanding your craft and your game, you really got to be watching the industry quite closely and understand the broader trends that are happening around you to make sure that, you as an individual and you as a company can begin to take on and adopt those changes as you go. So when you walk into a company like a Workday where you're $60 million or so in revenue, you certainly have a vision of what you want to do and how you want to get there, but you've got to continue to evolve and change as you go. And I think, where the market is today is yet again that moment in time where the companies have really got to take a look at and figure out where they're going to go and how they're going to get there.
So how do you keep up on it? And what are you doing specifically on a day-to-day basis to ensure that you're understanding where the industry is going? What sources are you using? Who are you talking to?
Yeah, I think, professional networking has always been something I've prided myself on. So I've always tried to find people in my sphere or outside of my sphere that can help me learn and understand more of what goes on. Your CEO, Mahe, I think, is a creature of this domain as well. And, every time I meet with him, he always teaches me something new as well. And when I think about my day, I like to think of the better part of 60% or more is about learning and growing and experiencing and networking and reaching out. So I talk with people in the private equity and venture capital world. I talk to people who are in the big companies today and what they're doing. I try and find small entrepreneurs and seek them out. I go to all the traditional sources of the LinkedIns and other places where I try and just consume as much as I can to understand what are people doing, why are they doing it, where are they going, what's driving them to get there, and trying to figure out what can I learn from that help make myself better, and also my clients that I work with better as well.
So when you're advising, and you advise a lot of C-suite as well as other levels of executives, what do you think it is for their focus that you're bringing to the table in terms of, so it's sort of that peer networking, so you're bringing some of that information, but what are they thinking about that's important to them? Because I think it's different today than it even was a year ago, and we're going to dive into the artificial intelligence piece of this. But what's the biggest concern for the C-suite right now?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of them come to me, and a lot of the time we spend is about how do you grow your business, and how do you grow your business smartly along the way? Because as the markets have been acting in the last few years, you don't get a lot of second chances to try, if you will. So the CEOs have come to me looking for how do I grow this business? But the playbook of old is not always the playbook of today. So to my point about learning all the time, you got to figure out what worked before may not be the path that we work to get there again. So my responsibility to them is to make sure that I understand how to leverage the experience I have in that space, but how do I bring the newer ideas and fresh technology ideas as well to them to understand how do we adopt these in a way that might be different in the way customers and consumers buy in the future versus the way they've maybe bought in the past. I came from an era where we had very long and extended sales campaigns that were heavily laden with a lot of resources. And quite frankly, with the rise of AI, the way in which buyers want to buy technology today has evolved quite differently from the way we came to market in the years past.
Sure. I think, getting into the AI piece, it's really important to understand not just where it's going, but where you sit in that relationship. And what do you find to be the biggest challenge for the individual contributor salesperson sitting inside an organization? I mean, we obviously have a group of salespeople here at Phenom, as does, Workday or SAP or Oracle. When you're coaching those sales organizations, how do you reach that individual salesperson, what they need to be doing on a day-to-day basis right now? Because it is challenging. I'm a technologist and it's tough to keep up, let alone having to understand and sell these technologies in an environment that is changing every 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, with a doubt, the role of the individual contributors changed dramatically, really starting with COVID. We went from very much of particularly in the enterprise sales space, a very much in-person interaction type of thing where the IC was the knowledge broker of information about their company, about their technology. And through them, and mostly through them, is how a potential customer gleaned that information and captured knowledge about the solution and consequently the benefits it might bring. Since that time, we've gone to a much more remote and somewhat hybrid infrastructure now. So the interactions is different. And with the rise of AI and how people consume AI chatbots otherwise, the client is learning information much more on their own, is self-serving themselves information that they used to get that information from the IC. So the role of the IC is changing quite dramatically, that they're not that broker of information in the earlier discovery process. A lot of time when a client comes to us, the information available to them is such that they are much more informed about what the solution does, how it might operate in their environment, what benefits they might derive, and potential value they might gather as well. So it's really making the individual contributor and the organization go back and look at what is the role of the future for the IC out there as well.
Yeah, and I mean, some would argue that that's just good, consultative selling, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's a lot deeper than that. I mean, when the difference between a really knowledgeable salesperson versus someone who maybe isn't doing their homework is always obvious, but maybe it's not so obvious in this environment because the technology is changing so quickly. And so let's talk a little bit about agents as an example. So agentic AI is really going to upend every technology out there. What are you thinking about as that individual contributor role, as a salesperson? What's the value that they're going to bring to promoting these technologies that can literally transform an entire organization overnight? And that's not an exaggeration. So what are you thinking about when you think about agentic in a selling environment?
I think it's fair to say the word AI and artificial intelligence is being used so broadly that sometimes it's not really clear exactly what does that mean in the context of your given solution, if you will. So I do think there is some opportunity and necessity for the IC to begin to help them understand what can it do explicitly for your company at the end of the day, and how can it really bring benefits? Because, like the word cloud gets bandied about and kind of means different things to different people, AI can mean different things to different people as well. So I think there is certainly the need to help them clarify and inform a client on what can it really do for me, but really what is a change that it's going to bring to a business? What will, if I'm selling an agentic solution for the recruiting side of the world or their talent side, how is that going to transform not just the technology landscape, but also the human behavior landscape? How will people work differently with the advent of and use of agentic technology in those functions today? How does it augment work in the future, and how does that really change the disposition of how work gets done? And how does it help that person get better as well? Because the intention here is to make sure that we use agentic technology in a way that helps further work and explore it as a greater benefit to society as a whole. So
are the objections around artificial intelligence and agents as that comes of age very, very quickly, are the objections similar? To maybe when you were talking about cloud computing you used to talk about moving from mainframe to cloud, internet technology in general. I find that the objections are very, very similar. But what are you experiencing and what are you hearing from salespeople?
Without a doubt. When I look back at the early days of particularly cloud computing and the thought that as a vendor would really be the master of this back office systems and they would manage and maintain those systems on behalf of clients, there was the concern of disenfranchising the IT organizations in these companies. And in reality, that didn't happen at all. In fact, they had other value-based activities they had to do inside those customers to help a business owner expand that solution set in a more profound way. So it did not disenfranchise. In fact, it just changed the benefit offering of what the role was of IT now that cloud computing came along. I think the same is going to be true of the line worker or the white collar worker as well, that as agentic technology comes in, it's going to change the dimension of what their job looks like, how we define their role, what are the activities that go on their role every day that work in partnership with the agentic technologies that are there to bring value for the company.
When you were, moving from mainframe, on-prem, to cloud, and as you're selling that, how deep was that conversation? IT worried that, we don't know this, or this is going to take our job. It's going to really transform things. But in the sales process, were you acting almost as an advisor to the business to say, here's the type of transformation your organization is going to go through? And, were there resources that you had at your disposal to help them really understand and operationalize these technologies? I mean, what was that like back then? Because I think we're going to go through the exact same thing again. But I think to your point that we were talking before we started recording, it's the speed at which it's happening that's the concern.
Yeah, for sure. When we kind of moved out of the mainframe and client server era, we spent a lot of time focusing on the IT organization as the person we brought the technology and the information and the knowledge about that solution to, and they then became the agent to tell the business on how to capitalize and use it. With the advent of SaaS, that changed. We spent a lot of time with the business personas, helping them understand how to get the best solutions, and in the role of IT changed to be in more of a supportive capacity. I think now we're going to see that change happen over again, because with the rise of AI, you do see the Office of the CIO playing a much more prominent role in helping the business solve problems in the organization today. And how do we use these agentic technologies in an appropriate way to help support the business, but also deal with the information security concerns that come as well. The role of the CIO, I think, is a very prominent position now to make certain that with the really explosion of AI technologies and the consumption of employee and customer data inside that, we need to be prudent in how we bring those forward, and companies to understand how that information is going to be used captively and otherwise along the way. So yeah, I see that similar kind of shift happening again back with agentic technologies as well.
And you focus, your career just around HR technologies. You focused a lot of your conversation at the CHRO level, CPO level. What is transforming for them right now? Because you talk about the CIO, and I agree. I think that role, CIO, CTO, because some organizations don't have a CIO, it all falls under CTO. Either role, their focus around information security, data security, privacy, compliance with regulatory environments, which are rapidly changing. Right. But I think what's different today is the impact of the technology on the value of human work is dramatically changing and very, very quickly. So what is the CHRO thinking about right now as they're brought into this conversation? And let me add one other dimension to this. I've been with Phenom now for 9 years. Prior to this, I owned a software company, wasn't in HR technologies. It was more communications and marketing. But when I came into this domain, the one thing that I recognized was the CHRO and those organizations did not really understand how to buy software, because that decision was being made by CIO, CTO. Somebody else is making the decision. Here's your system. We bought it. Go learn to use it. Yep. But now they are integral to that decision-making process. But there's still a lot of education that has to take place. And part of the issue is the CHRO may not always be in line with the CIO or CTO's goals. Do you find, number one, that that the truth in educating the people organization has become a huge part of how we sell and bring value? But also, do you see let's just call it the people organization and the technology organization starting to really work hand in hand and create shared measures of success in the organization, whereas 20 years ago, they were almost two different organizations entirely.
Yeah.
Like, how is that relationship changing at the C-suite level?
I think it's changed substantially, and more the point, and to your point, I think it's really forcing those two constituents to come close together. I think the CHRO wakes up every day worried about how does AI change the landscape of my workforce, but not only the types of roles we need, what those people do, how they interact with the agentic technology, what does it mean for their life experiences and job experiences here at our company. So that is, first and foremost most in their mind about how do we go down this path? How do we take on this journey? And because of the complexity and some of the challenges that is in that, the partnership with the Office of CIO is more important than ever before. So I do see those two organizations coming close together when, rather than just having a business owner buying a piece of technology that they think is best and using a SaaS platform and just, kind of telling IT after the fact. I see a much more collegial approach coming in the marketplace where Office of IT, Office of HR are coming together to figure out how do we bring this enabling technology, knowing the potential benefits it could bring, and what does that mean to the dimensionality of my workforce and the types of roles I need, the types of jobs that they do, and how the technology plays a role in that. So I do expect the continuation of seeing those two teams moving close together, working in greater partnership to figure out how do we bring those benefits to our enterprise.
And do you find that a good salesperson can be the conduit to bring them together, right?
Yes. And there again, I think speaks to the changing of that role. It's changing of not just talking about my solution features and benefits, but getting into how does the dimension of the workforce change? What does it mean to the types of people you hire in the future? How do we retool skills and capabilities in the enterprise today to take advantage of these technologies along the way? So we get out of here's the three cool things that my technology does, into more of how does the workforce change? And not just in terms of feature function and basic little roles, but more of how do we come to market? How do we come to the enterprise in a different way than we have before? And what does the effect of agentic technology mean to that conversation?
How important is it for a sales professional to also be somewhat of a thought leader? Because I think what you're suggesting, or what you're directly saying is, and I'll put it in my own words, is don't just jump into the demo and start promoting your product. Yeah. That will come in time. You're going to build trust in a different way. You're going to build confidence in a different way. It's not necessarily going to be in the product. The product's going to have its own trust and confidence component if it performs and it does what it says it's supposed to do. But getting the attention of the C-suite, I think, is becoming a real challenge. One of those dimensions is really around thought leadership. Are you starting a conversation with the C-suite around vision? Like this is why, not just why this company exists, but this is why these technologies exist. And let me tell you what's going to happen in the future. And you don't necessarily have to be, pinpoint accuracy, right, but painting a vision. How it does that work from a sales capacity?
I think you have to be in this new age of selling, because I think the go-to-market technologies are coming. Is the demos will be done there, and they'll generally be self-served to the customer by way of the things that they want to see and learn and know. There won't be this heavy lift of us coming out and doing this big demo as the major event of the sales campaign. Frankly, that's not what the client needs. They need somebody to help tell them is how does this technology change where we're going as a company, and they need vision and leadership from that team. And so my counsel to the individual contributors and sales leadership is go figure out how to transform your team to be that consultative seller, that strategic thought leader out around your product to help them understand how to take on that vision, how to materialize that vision. Because tooling my team to just be capable in features and functions is not going to get it done. We've got to go out there and really help them understand, in the face of a new and emerging technology that's changing exceedingly rapidly, how do we take this on as a client, and what does it mean to my workforce as time goes on in the world of HR tech?
I mean, the goal of any salesperson should always be to sell and generate revenue. You're responsible to the business. I mean, you're running a business essentially inside a business. I'm a believer that the money will come if the client trusts you, and you build trust through those conversations. So what are some of the other really good practices that high-performing sales individuals do that you've seen work flawlessly?
Yeah. Similar to my own experiences, one of the things that I've seen high-performing salespeople do is build great networks. So when they go into a new client and just want to help them understand where they can go, introduce them to other clients who've taken this journey and continue to connect them with others that can share their experiences and help them understand what they did, why they did it, what benefits they've derived. Let your clients talk for you. Build a great network. So when you're not out selling to the next best client, what are you doing to really engage your existing clients to understand the journey they've been on, and ask for their support and help and permission to be able to use their insights, their experiences for your next client. Creating that network for your customers is a wonderful opportunity to show, one, your compassion for their business. Two is the benefits of that ecosystem. You've got other customers who've been down the journey who have learned probably great lessons along the way. That's one of your biggest intellectual property assets that you have is that client experience. Use that to your advantage to help them understand and educate that next client as well. They'll be the best voice that you could possibly have. And when it comes to establishing trust, you'll reach that point of trust much better if you have somebody telling your story on your behalf versus you just trying to tell them and hope that they'll believe you at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think it's important that you lead with that, and you become that thought leader and partner. And I get the if you really believe in a product, you want to show people how great it is. Sure. But the product, again, if it's working, it's going to do that for you. What I've seen working is similar, where a lot of the salespeople here at Phenom practice what you're talking about. They'll immediately make connections for clients or potential clients, because we're prospecting at that point, and say, why don't talk to me, talk to this person over here. They had exactly the same experience. And regardless of where we take things, I'm going to get you connected, right? What are some of the mistakes that salespeople make in this environment? Like, what are you seeing where you're going, like, don't do that?
Yeah. Certainly, when I've seen sales professionals walk in and have not done their research ahead of time, that's terrible, because you end up talking all about your company and not about the client. You're there to talk about what the client's current situation is, what their needs are, what their aspirations, what their goals are. So coming in prepared for a conversation is the number one most important thing to do. There's nothing worse than showing up and saying, well, tell me about your business, and not having any appreciation of what they do and really what their needs might be along the way. There's enough tooling out there in the marketplace today that's not a strenuous exercise to go put some time to go do that. So go out and learn about your client first. Second is become a student of your game. I mean, you're out selling agentic technology. You need to be fluent in what that is. You don't need to be a technical expert, but you absolutely need to be a solution expert around how it helps companies solve problems. And if you're not prepared to speak to how it's going to solve this customer's problems that you've already done the research on, then you have not come prepared to help meet the client in the place that need to be met.
Do you think that agentic technologies will replace salespeople?
No. And I say that with conviction because I don't see it replacing any job outright. I see it as an augmentation of roles, because I do think there's a need and a human element that needs to come along with that. So I do think the job will change, but as an outright replacement, no, I don't see that. Now, are there certain functions that probably can be more automated faster with greater benefits? For sure. When people want to gain information that's commonplace, they shouldn't have to go through necessarily human every time to get something that's very consumable and repeatable, much like any other business process. But I do think we start talking about value and transformation in companies. There's a role and a place for salespeople to help a customer through that journey.
So the interesting part of that is you'll hear, especially in the media, that these technologies are being designed to replace people. And I think it's very provocative, and it certainly sells advertising for sure, right? Sure. It gets people interested. Yeah. But I do think the reality is very, very different. So I think a good salesperson really understands where the next layer of human value is with these technologies. Let's talk about where this is all going. I mean, agents, we're going to release over a dozen this year. Yeah. Workday has an entire agentic marketplace. SAP has built, and I think they've released 3 or 4 at this point. Mm-hmm. Oracle, same thing. How does this change in terms of the speed of getting in front of clients? How does the agentic technology give you better access to the C-suite or to executives that are making these, I think they're going to be very difficult buying decisions.
Yeah. I think for years has been, business problems that we've never been able to solve. And even as much as the automation that we brought has helped to kind of lean in further, some of them still remain out there. And I think that, some of the additional capabilities that agentic technology will bring will help to bridge that gap around a place we haven't been able to go the full mile to go solve business problems along the way. Some of them can be very small in the minutia. I'll give you an example of one that maybe Phenom is trying to solve for as well. You have annual employee performance reviews. Typically, the time a manager does that is once per year, and they generally send a little survey over and say, fill this out, and we sit down, and it's kind of a one-time event, whereas agentic technology could help inform the manager day over day, week over week around what's going on in performance, how can you make a difference with that employee and help them learn more, achieve more, or upskill more along the way. And so really change the dimension of what happens inside of our company now between employee and manager to really bring a greater outcome for the employee and a great outcome for the company as well. So I think there's going to be examples like that and many other ones along the way that help to really just improve the quality of performance and employee experience in the everyday life of all the people out there.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also changing the landscape of how business operations are even financed. You think about the markets right now and how companies are evaluated for their own investments. How are salespeople integral to that part of the process in terms of building a sales pipeline, giving visibility into where the company is going to grow to and from? I mean, I think salespeople are literally the front line. They're hearing the client problems. They're also hearing how they want to grow and scale their businesses. How does that cycle back to leadership and ensuring that leadership understands that when they're trying to get investment for their business? Because this is what we're hearing right now. The markets are closed. Getting capital is very, very difficult or very, very expensive. How do you get the attention of the investment market through your sales organization beyond just selling? Because everyone says selling solves all problems. Yeah. It sounds easy, but it's hard to do.
I assure you it's not easy.
Yeah.
One of the challenges that we always have faced and continue to face is that, becoming predictable. And, it's one thing to say, yes, revenue solves all problems. What an investor is looking for is, I want predictable results along the way. I want to know in the face of this investment, what can be achieved with relative as much certainty as possible. And I think AI can play a prominent role in helping companies be more predictive and predictable in terms of how they're going to generate results in the end. I think there's ways that by mining that data and looking at information in our sales campaigns and in our sales executions, that we can now learn more about, based upon traditional outcomes, how can we be more predictive by taking these actions, there's a higher likelihood we get to success. So I think the consumption and advent of utilizing AI technology in the sales go-to-market methodologies will make companies more predictable for results and make them better opportunities for investments, because in using those technologies as an investor, I can count on a more likely return versus just putting money in hoping that the results come later.
So when you're building a sales organization, or in your case, when you're coaching and advising sales organizations, organizationally, what are the biggest challenges that you see right now? And I'll seed it with a small one that I see. I see people throwing bodies at the problem. And that thins out the entire organization and stresses the entire organization. Is it better to run lean in these environments where innovation is happening so quickly that knowledge becomes your power? And if you have too much headcount, that could be an issue with understanding and leveling the playing field around knowledge and knowledge transfer, between you and that organization. So big organizations or run mean and lean?
Yeah. You make a good point. And, similar to our conversation earlier, back in the day, we as the sales professionals were kind of the information brokers to prospective clients along the way, and even to customers who were open to expand their portfolio with us. So to grow that revenue stream, we would grow through adding headcount and diminishing territory sizes. So instead of you carrying 25 accounts, you now had 5 accounts, and you had 10 more guys around you and guys and gals that could carry that. So that was the method of old to go do that. And I would advocate today that's no longer the playbook we should be looking at. We should be looking at how do we find the right balance of headcount and technology to figure out what is the right way to come to the market to approach the customers. And because of the ongoing maturity and scalability of the AI solutions out in the marketplace and the bounty of them out there, now is the right time to go back and take a pause in how we're growing the business to figure out, are we utilizing the best balance of technology and people to bring the best model to come to the marketplace today? Because the days of just throwing bodies at it are out the window. And quite frankly, no investor is going to fund that as an outcome. They're going to look for ways, how are you going to optimize with what you have and utilize emerging technologies to help you go do that along the way.
So who's doing it right in the marketplace? Not to name names, you can, but Is it in this case software companies that are doing a really good job? Is it a particular domain that you're seeing? Because you advise across multiple domains. But so where is it working that you're seeing?
I'll start from this side, and that probably the ones that are having the hardest time to adopt are the ones that have been in that model for so long. When you built the huge infrastructure and all the operational teams around it and all the support teams that go with it, pulling that back is a very difficult task. It's one that's been your model of success before, and kind of walking away from that is difficult. The ones probably had the most success are probably the earlier in startup companies that don't have the burden of that infrastructure today or the foundation to go launch off of. So they're looking to figure out, how do I come to market and bring my solution forward in a way that does require huge amounts of infrastructure or investment along the way. So the newer companies are the ones probably adopting this quicker and trying to figure out, how do I take advantage of this? Now, companies the size like Phenom are in a beautiful position where you don't have a long legacy of heavy infrastructure and cost burden, that you can kind of pivot quickly. And so those mid-sized companies come with the benefit of experience and success to date that have still the nimbleness inside to move and have the flexibility to adopt new technology as well. So I'd say those mid-sized enterprises are probably in the best position today to take advantage of it, and the ones I see making the most gains in the short term.
So one final question, and I'm really curious. If you were to build a sales organization today, what is the profile of the salesperson that ideally you would want to hire?
Somebody who's been in a highly consultative process, first of all, would be where I'd look. I'd look to people who have been kind of advising type roles along with selling type roles, because I think that advisory mentality is really key and critical here. I look for people that have an appreciation of vision and understand how to communicate vision along the way. And then lastly, I look for value-based people. People are associated to speaking the language of value to a customer, not about feature function. So I really try and find people who have the maturity, understanding, and knowledge-based to talk in a value-based conversation.
Cool. Ed, this has been really insightful. I appreciate your time. And any final thoughts or pieces of advice that you'd give to the viewers out there?
Yeah, I'd say stay nimble, stay loose. This is a marketplace going to change very, very quickly. It's proven so time over time. And I think if anything else, keep your mind and your eyes open. There's a lot to learn and a lot more to come still that frankly we don't know yet. So I'd say keep networking, keep your eyes open, and stay a student of the game.
Good advice. Thanks for your time, Ed.
Thank you, Cliff. Pleasure.